Hey everyone, Laura here.
Tanya here.
We've been friends for over a decade and worked together for a long time in call centers as agents, quality analysts, managers, and supervisors.
In 2018, we started up this podcast to talk about the batshit bonkers bullshit we see and continue to see in our time at work and at home as consumers.
This episode, however, is unique. We do these deep dive episodes where we talk about corporate scandals like Enron, scams like Theranos, or even cons like Scientology.
This is one of those episodes, so enjoy.
Love your faces.
Smooches.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
This job would be great if it wasn't for the fucking customers.
You're always this stupid. Did you take lessons? Just calm down.
Oh, fuck you!
You can't handle the truth.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
In other words, be nice, asshole.
So now that we have a lay of the land here, let's talk about some of the deals. The first person that we're going to talk about when it comes to the deals is a woman named Rebecca Mark. A lot of ex-employees blame her for the downfall of Enron just as much as they blame Skilling. Her and Skilling, when he first started, she was kind of more the public face of Enron.
Mm-hmm.
She was a woman in this highly male-dominated industry. She was kind of the Enron public superstar, right? Her and Skilling were button heads from the word go, right? But here's the thing: is they were so incredibly similar, and ultimately they blame each other for it. But they were running the same policies and practices. They were doing it both the same way.
They probably didn't. You know what? In that situation, I would say it was probably a one-up pissing contest,
Totally.
Right? Like, oh, well, he did this, so I can do this better, and she did this, and...
Just wait until you find out how he gets rid of her and the amount of money he spends to get rid of her. She started off, she was married, and she was having an affair with her boss.
Did anybody in there...
I know, right? You should, I'm telling you, read the books, watch the documentary, and there are so many affairs, it's not even fun. And this relationship in particular was like soap opera, like fight, sleep together, constantly, right? But it always kind of, led people to believe that the only reason she got where she got was because she was fucking the boss, right? And eventually he left and she was kind of put in charge of all of his shit. She's one of those women in corporate life that I hate. She's one of those women that believes that her mini skirts and high heels and the way she presents herself is part of the show.
Right.
She plays it up and uses it and would flat out say, I get where I get and I get the opportunities I get because of how I look.
Oh, I hate that shit.
It handicaps other women who aren't willing to do that.
Or other women who look like us, like normal fucking women.
Exactly.
And there's no way I'm going to walk around like that and put myself in those positions either.
Yeah, it looks out for number one, but what if, you're handicapping all other women? And she would say, well, if you walk in just assuming that you're not going to be, taken advantage of, you won't be. Fuck you, bitch.
I can do that without my tits out.
Thank you. She would literally have costume changes. She would change her clothes up to 3 times a day. And she really considered it to be part of the show. And knowing men, I personally believe they were like, oh, she changed her clothes because she fucked somebody.
Right.
Maybe the next person will be me.
That's so disgusting.
Like, she's gross.
How would you, why as a woman now, and I work in a business that is, I have to say, call centers are pretty mixed.
Yeah.
Pretty mixed. But our CEO is a female.
Right.
And I saw her in some raggedy ass clothes the other day on a ladder painting a room.
There you go.
I mean, and she doesn't do that. That's not what she does.
Right.
At all. Which is nice to see because
she doesn't have to do that.
She doesn't have to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's willing to get her hands dirty.
Yeah.
And you can appreciate that in a leader.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to do that.
Yeah.
This woman is just ridiculous.
And that kind of shit sets women back 50 years every time they do it.
Totally.
Every fucking time you see a bitch with her boobs hanging out and a little mini skirt. And you know what? If I was built a little bit nicer, I've told y'all for a long time, you'd catch hell putting clothes on me.
Yeah.
But at work? No, I'm not going to do that.
Here's the thing: is it really just feels like I'm not willing to use my talents to be
and my
recognized.
brain, my God-given talent,
like men are.
Yeah.
Like
Like, I
judge
don't
me
have
the
to,
same
'cause I
way
got
you
some
judge a
boobs.
man.
Right.
Like it's crazy.
I don't have to because I have boobs.
Exactly. They described her as being this gorgeous glamour girl.
Oh my God! Don't tell me she was like a trash can.
She's a dog. It was just her outfits, right? So it's not that she's a gorgeous woman. It's the fact that she was selling sex.
So, like-
She's a fucking dog. Look at this ugly bitch.
Oh my God, her face, she looks like the Crypt Keeper.
Thank you. But they're sitting here like, oh, she's gorgeous and blah. I'm like, no, she's not. She's ugly as fuck. But she's got her boobs out, so when you're only looking at this, of course her face is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Christ.
Yeah, if I take a selfie at a certain angle, I look like a hot ass bitch, but
Thank you.
Jesus, she has a horse face.
I know, right? But here's the thing: is as much as, like I said, as much as she bumped heads with Skilling, she ran her business the same way he did. She would pay out, if a business lost $1 trillion, the contract was signed. She would pay out her people like $5 million bonuses. These people paid their people to fail. Like, it's crazy.
Well, because all their money was on paper anyway, so
Pretty
it really didn't
much.
matter.
So she was put in charge of something called emerging markets, right? Emerging markets was a big deal back in the 90s when NAFTA happened and a lot of, developing countries realized that they could get money from American and UK corporations to come in and invest in them,
Right.
raise, standard of living, improve their communities, blah, 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 if they let them in rather than saying, no, thanks. Right. So she was part of, but in order to build, let's say, a call center in India, first you got to have power. That's
Right.
where Enron comes in, right? She ran around the world promising to build power plants, all these, like, she literally spent billions of dollars, right, to build power plants that never did anything, that never gave Enron a penny, just to, once again, just get the deal on paper. It doesn't matter if it actually makes you money.
Just as long as we have it on paper, because then they can do that whole
Exactly.
thing.
So we're going to talk about two of the deals that she did. One is what they call Dabol. Dabol is in India, right? Enron prided itself as going where no one else would go and seeing the future the way nobody else could see it. And they've been proven right in some cases. But with India, they really failed to see something basic. And the basic was India can't afford to pay for the power that you are
Yeah, there are
generating.
people living in trash heaps there. So,
Like, are you kidding me? So they go and they basically bribed the government to let them build a power plant. Now, they said that this $20 million they gave to the government before it was being built, that it was to educate the Indian people about capitalism. But when the new party got in control, they were like, where did that money go? And they could never really prove it in court, but it was so obvious what they did, right? And this deal was atrocious. They picked a site that was so remote for the build that they would literally have to build their own roads, their own hospitals, their own everything, because it was so goddamn out there, right? The contract was awful for both sides. I don't know how you come up with a contract this awful, right? It guaranteed money for Enron to be paid by the Indian government, and it was just a huge giveaway to Enron, right? But at the same time, Enron took on so much of the risk that if it failed, like, they ended up losing $1 billion.
but they've already known that $1 billion to them isn't shit because they can just make it up again.
Pretty much.
Literally make it up.
Literally. Just materialized out of thin air, right? Now, this caused they did not recognize that this would cause such a major backlash with the Indian people. It caused a riot to break out at the build site, and the Enron guards that were put in charge of guarding the site, they actually were charged with human rights violations for how they treated the rioters. Like, it was insane, right? It caused the government that was in power to be voted out of power. That deal. They campaigned on that deal, right? So when the new people got in charge, do you really think they were going to bend over backwards to make it fucking happen?
Right.
Of course they weren't, right? This deal was such a fucking cluster, right?
I would have loved to have been just like a fly on the wall, watching some of these deals come together.
Oh, I know.
Like, what?
So Doppel was actually finished, but it's a ruin. It literally sits. It's like this big gold monstrosity that sits right next to this like little shanty town out in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Oh
It's
my
insane.
God.
So she lost $1 billion. But by this point, Skilling had maneuvered himself to become the COO, right? Which meant he's now her boss. And she was horrified. So she convinced Enron to basically give her like almost $4 billion to go buy a water company in the UK. And she was like, we're gonna be the world's leading water company, but didn't hire, once again, just like Skilling, didn't hire people with actual experience in water. She was like, what am I gonna do? Hire some 50-year-old water engineer from Cincinnati? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you fucking do.
Instead, what she did was hire nothing but super smart MBAs and said, they'll figure it out. Once again, your fucking degree is not everything. And companies that believe it is are fucking stupid.
Yep.
Right? Skilling could see this was going to fail, but he was willing to throw billions of dollars out the door just to publicly humiliate her.
Oh my God.
Right? Now, if you read The Smartest Guys in the Room, you can hear how her deals with Brazil and the Dominican Republic, like she screwed up the Brazil and Dominican Republic so hard she fucked it. It was terrible. But her big thing with this water company that she purchased, that she called Azurix, once again, it was, we're going to run around the world and agree to bring water to the masses, right? But as soon as the deal's signed, everybody gets their bonus and nobody actually has to care about how you fulfill the terms of the deals at all. So the way that the deal structure worked is you got 10% of the deal. So if you got a deal signed for $90 million, you got $9 million the day it was signed. You got a $9 million check.
What kind of buffoons keep giving this broad money?
No, it literally was just to embarrass her. He did it on purpose.
Oh my God.
Right? He spent $2.4 billion just buying her the company, let alone the billions it cost to get it running, just to embarrass her, just to prove a point.
That's an expensive point to prove.
Yeah, no shit. So finally, Lay and the board ended up firing her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Humiliating her. Like all of Enron's other failures, Skilling managed to hide, but that one he pushed out to the public for the world to see her crash and burn. Now, she ended up getting lucky because she bought, cashed out all of her Enron stock. But to this day, she still is like, well, at least I was bringing in actual money, not fake money. It's no, you weren't. She still is bitter. She's like, had they just given me more time and had it not been for Jeff and I'm like, bitch.
They set you up. You were making
and
fake businesses.
Into it. You walked in. People actually told her when she first started, like, this is a trap. People told her this is a trap, and she still kept at it.
There's no fucking way. There's no way. I mean, not only that, but you have to know that this company, if you're in that business, and if you're in that world, just like in our world, right? We know what call centers to work in and not to work in.
Yeah.
We know which ones pay the best. We know which ones have the best benefits. And it's the same culture, I would think, in these sort of businesses, right? There has to be somebody not bumping their gums someplace along the line that says you don't want to work for this company because this is what's going to happen. This is what's been happening. And I don't think that you should put yourself in that position and you just go. That means you just want to make a bunch of money. You're not in it for anything else. And who doesn't want to make a bunch of money? But damn, I'm not going to prison.
But it's, you're going to make a bunch of money just for not actually doing anything. Like,
so why do they need, if you're not really doing anything, then why do you need a fucking master's degree from Harvard Business to do nothing.
Now here's the
because
thing.
I'm not that educated, and I can come up with some fucking scams. I'm just letting
No
y'all know right
shit.
now. I can come up with some shit,
Right.
and we'll all be rich, motherfuckers. But
And this is what we used to talk about when it came to like coaching our collectors, when we were like, you're talking too much and you're giving them the answers to questions
Right.
instead of asking them the questions. We used to call it working harder to fail.
giving them the no.
This
Don't-
company was literally paying people to fail. They set them up to just, we're going to reward you as long as you get a deal. We don't care how one-sided, lopsided, or shitty it is, as long as you get that deal on paper. So essentially, this is a company that paid people to fail. There was no incentive, and we'll get into this a little bit more
Did
later.
the people of England really need an additional water
Not really.
plant or whatever?
It was an English company, I believe, but it was one of those companies that still provided water all over the world. There were places where it was needed, but they made huge assumptions that they could just make it happen. They made promises that, yeah, we can get water over that mountain and through that valley and across that gang guerrilla territory, and we'll get you the water. It was like, wait, what? They just said they could do it without actually looking to see if they could. So now, but here's the thing, is she was actually paid out her contract. And this is the biggest problem with so many of these fucking people from Enron. If you were terminated under contract, you got millions of dollars to leave. So even if you were fired for cause, if you negotiated your contract to get paid one way or another, Enron paid you to fail.
So fuck it. You're still going to get some money.
Exactly.
Hi, everyone. Tanya and I would really appreciate it if you could do us a quick favor. Head on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. Make sure to select podcast in the top drop-down if you're having trouble finding it. All 5-star reviewers will be admitted into the Quality Star Club and be entered into a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card every month. Now back to the show.
So those were Rebecca Mark's big enchiladas that fucking sank to the bottom of the ocean. Skilling had his own.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
These are his, he literally called these the 2 big enchiladas, right? That would someday, make billions for Enron. That was his plan, right? The 2 divisions were called EES and Broadband.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about EES first. This was called Enron Energy Services, and the goal was to provide an alternative to the local utility company and offer people a choice in who their utility provider was. So, like, we have Colorado Springs Utilities. Imagine if we could pick from Colorado Springs Utilities or Denver Utilities, right?
Right.
They ran around the country saying, there's all this grassroots anger of consumers that they're being locked in to only being able to choose one utility provider. And if they had a choice, they would go to somewhere else and blah, 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 blah. They ended up getting into a couple little test markets because that is regulated state by state. It's not regulated by the federal government. So they got a couple of markets to agree to test it, and they went balls to the wall for it. They actually spent, this I think is crazy. They picked one little town that only had about 5,000 people, and they spent $30 million on advertising.
For 5, what the hell?
I know, right? It's insane. But their big one that they got to agree to the pilot program was California. California, they spent like $100 million, real dollars.
Real dollars.
Real money dollars, right? On the plan, or on the program. But they only got about 50,000 people to sign up. Even offering them like free power for 1 week a year. And free power from like 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. for certain businesses or certain retail markets. Like, people still did. There wasn't this grassroots anger. Like, they believed that if they said it, it was true. And they believed they could advertise their way into making it true. And it just wasn't there. People didn't give a shit. They were like, this is reliable. It works. My bills aren't astronomical.
What's the problem?
What's the issue? Right? So now, but here's the thing. Once again, Skilling had gone out and already told investors in the marketplace, this is going to be successful. And that's what he did constantly. Him and Lay would run around telling people that their programs already worked. And EES in particular, they fucking hoodwinked the analysts. They actually did this. They brought people from all over the company, different divisions, had them bring their personal pictures and things, brought them up to the EES floor where they didn't work, right? And had them pretend to be on the phones making deals. They brought in investors and analysts and said, see, this division already has, 5,000 employees that are doing deals. I mean,
Shut
they
up.
literally tricked these people. One lady said, I spent the whole day just chilling on the phone talking to my girlfriends, looking at my pictures that I brought up from, she was like a secretary.
Oh my God. Just staged it. Just
And then
staged the whole
they
thing.
flat out said, all clear, everybody can go back. Like, right. They spent a day.
Spend a day just chilling out.
Just chilling. Like, to fuck with analysts. It's like, so when you go out and you've already promised the market that something is going to work, now you have to make it work, no matter what the reality is.
Right.
Right? So, after the retail market failed, they switched their strategy to go to industrial end users. So what they would do is they would go to companies like Kaiser Permanente and California State University and say, we'll provide you power. Kaiser Permanente, they had 2,000 locations over 36 states that they agreed to provide utilities for. But they were saying, we're going to hire you people that will come in and service everything. They'll change light bulbs. They'll handle everything. We'll do the billing and everything else. But they had never that level of service requires customer service.
Right.
Which Enron did not do. In 4 years, the California State University never got an accurate bill that was on time or accurate. Never. So after the first year, they had been overpaying, and then when they figured it out, they ended up getting refunds, but the refunds took forever. So eventually, California State University said, we're not paying you until we get an accurate and on-time bill, right? They ended up not paying their utilities for 3 years because EES could not get their shit together. All they cared about was getting you to sign on the dotted line.
Right.
And because Skilling and Lay kept going out and saying, these are going to make X amount of money, these deal makers would actually go and get them to sign deals that actually gave them money. And the part of the deal that would have actually made Enron money, they shelved because they had to make their numbers for that quarter, right? So they ended up doing only deals that paid people to be their customers. But once again, these people are getting multi-million-dollar bonuses just getting that deal on paper.
It seems like a real shit show. I'm pretty smart and I can keep up with a lot of shit, but after a week, I'd have been like, I'm done. I can't do this.
This is stupid. Now, something to keep in mind, and this is really, really important at this point for us to talk about this. There's a quote that's attributed to Joe Biden. I will admit that I haven't researched to find out if he actually said it. But the quote is, don't tell me what your company values. Show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. Right? If you look at how Enron actually structured their bonuses, you think about our scorecard, right, for reps.
Right.
It's 25% is productivity, 25% is, quality, et cetera, et cetera. Not one single part of Enron's bonus structure for anybody was based on how much money actually came in the door.
It was just based on the deals you made.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
So if you don't, people would flat out say, I would just throw the deals over the wall and tell everybody, you figure it out. It wasn't my problem anymore. Now, here's the thing. When I worked at Newton's, I actually had some people that had that mentality in the sales department. But the difference is Newton's actually had entire departments that were developed and enabled and had the ability to care for the customers.
Right.
And to fix whatever the salespeople fucked up or whatever the salespeople lied about. Right?
Right.
And we would coach them, obviously, and Newton's took that very seriously. This, they just didn't. And the fact that it wasn't on their bonus structure, I think tells you everything you need to know about.
It was a free-for-all.
Exactly. So, Skilling and Pry had made all these promises to the market and fooled them, tricked them, the whole nine. This is the department that eventually Skilling came down and said, you guys are going to be making $500 million. And it was like, there's just no plan at all. And I think that's kind of where the idea of the Stanford prison experiment comes in. You threw all these people in here because there was no corporate vision, right? You throw all these people in here and said, go make money. So you end up having like 30,000 different little businesses. If there's no team and everybody's not working towards the same goal, everybody's only looking out for themselves, then how can you achieve anything substantial? Like, you can't.
You can't.
But even within Enron, shit that Skilling would say that were signs of being a terrible fucking manager, people thought it was visionary. He would give a direction to some people. This, I think, was hilarious. He would give direction, and some people would actually try to carry out that direction, not realizing that wasn't really what he wanted. Skilling's deputies ended up having to translate what he wanted all the time. They would say, Jeff knows what he wants, but he doesn't know how to get there. Figure it out. And because of this chaos, people were moving around the company left and right in what they called the Klieg light syndrome. If Skilling said the shiny light was, and the future of the company was EES, everybody would just transfer into EES. You didn't even have to ask. You just move your desk. And people would be like, what's your job? And they're like, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
I'm part of the vision.
I'm part of the vision. Exactly. Right? Vision. They would just get up and move themselves. And people move so much around that building that in the last few years, this number is amazing. Enron spent up to $6 million a year just to move desks.
Oh my God.
That's what they spent money on. Just moving people around onto different floors and shit.
How the fuck? We moved from one side of the building to the other and paid for it for ourselves. I mean, we were like pulling agents off the phone to move desks with the IT guys.
I know, right?
That's retarded.
That's what they did.
Can't.
Enjoying this episode? Make sure to subscribe to Q as in Cucumber in iTunes or your favorite podcasting platform so you can hear the complete story. The new episodes will be downloaded automatically so you don't miss a thing. Now back to the show.
So, because they made all these promises, the EES employees were scrambling to get deals on paper to make the deals look like reality. And the fact Skilling tricked the analyst with that little fake city of employee stunt, right? Everything would be revealed if they didn't make the numbers. So it was a scramble every day. One guy summed it up like this. He said, working at EES was like going to work every day with your hair on fire. And the only thing you could put it out with was a hammer.
Jesus, that's awful.
That's how they felt because, like, they would sign a deal that they said was going to bring in $500 million, right? And then Skilling and Pye would go out to the market and be like, "This deal's worth $1.2 billion," and he was like, "You just want to say, like, are you nuts?" But if you said that, you were labeled as not smart enough to figure it out and shunned. Anybody who tried to introduce reality into the situation was just beaten down. Like,
wow, I feel like I'm having deja vu.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel like...
It feels like deja vu.
It so reminds you of Chucky's and Chew.
Yeah, it's ridiculous because if you're against or if you're for trying to do the right thing, the ethical and moral thing, that was like a clutch
but
my
we can
pearls
get away
moment
with it
for them because, oh my God, you're not looking at our bottom line. Fuck them. What's our bottom line?
And the thing I always felt like at Chucky's and Chew, especially, and even at Cal, it was, well, we're never going to get caught. And one of the things they say at the end of The Smartest Guys in the Room, at the end of the book, they were like, in the end, they believed that doing something illegal just meant you didn't get caught.
Right.
And it was like,
no.
It's
okay if you don't get caught.
You end up like this, like Enron ended up.
Right.
That's not right.
Right. I mean, and granted, Chucky's and Shoes is a much smaller scale.
Totally. But still.
Much smaller. But it's still there. I mean, those actions, that behavior, all of that was there.
Totally. Skilling would also refuse to admit to analysts, like the financial analysts and the stock investors and stuff what the company actually was, which was a speculation company. He would say, no. We're not a speculation company. We're a logistics company, because speculation companies, their stock price is far lower because the value can fluctuate.
Right.
From the morning, it could start off at $4, and by that night, it's $100.
Right.
And he didn't want that. He wanted the stock to just continually go up and up. So he would always just deny what the company actually was to everybody. And when people would charge that this was a speculation company, he would insist over and over and over that he wasn't. And he would turn the tables on you. Tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. You're just not smart enough to get it.
Yeah.
And he would make you feel, so he ended up making investors and people that didn't understand it feel small and stupid.
Right.
Because, and even with Bethany McLean, when she wrote her article, after Jim Chanos told her to, and I believe that's jumping ahead a little bit, but when she called him, he was like, people that throw rocks at the company just don't understand, and people who ask questions like this just aren't smart enough to get it. And it's like, and everybody fell for that bully mentality.
Right. Of course they did. Because
of just like, oh, if I don't, it's the emperor has no clothes. You know, if you're not special if you don't see the clothes. So nobody says you're naked.
Yeah, no, but I drank the Kool-Aid, so you have on a fancy $2,000 suit.
Exactly.
And I can't do that. I can't. I don't know, especially where my livelihood is concerned, and taking care of my kids and everything that I need to do. I can't, even for a lot of money, I don't know that I would be able to put myself in a situation where I would be afraid of going to prison or something.
Right.
You know, I would much rather be honest and work for everything than the way these people made this money.
I need to be able to look myself in the mirror. And at myself in the mirror.
Right, and I need my kids to be able to say, you know what, my mom worked her ass off for everything we ever had.
Exactly.
And not, my mom was handed this because she bought into the
because
fraud.
She did something illegal.
Right, she bought into the fraud for a few extra dollars. You know?
Not worth it.
No.
Not worth it. So part of this whole like speculation company thing, here's the one thing that he kind of let a little window in. Going back to that statement of, you know, strategic planning is the antithesis to building a corporation. Most corporations, when they come up with their targets, it's a very, you know, thought out process of looking at performance and looking at numbers and understanding what's possible with your workforce and how you might want to grow to increase those numbers and blah, blah, blah. Skilling wouldn't do any of that. He would literally go to stock analysts and say, what's the target price that you need to make our stock, to recommend our stock go higher? And they would give him a number and he would go back and be like, okay, so the target is 500. And it was like, what? Okay.
And at that point, you know, the analysts are just like making shit up.
Totally.
How are you going to tell them? Okay, it's $12.46. That's what we've got today. And you couldn't tell that guy that.
Pretty much. So the other big enchilada was broadband. Ooh, Jesus.
Like broadband?
So you got to remember, this is like 1998, 1999. They announced broadband. And there were, just as there were two parts to TES, the retail and the industrial side, there's two parts to broadband. One is they believed, again, this hubris is insane. They believed that they could create the same kind of trading market that they did with natural gas, with broadband, with bandwidth. So basically what they told the market is that they had developed the technology. So let's say you have a business that works during the day and I have a business that works at night. Right? I'm technically paying for bandwidth, or you're technically paying for bandwidth at night that you don't need. And I'm paying it for the day when I don't need it. What they said is, we've developed the technology so that you can use my broadband during the day and I can use yours at night. And it would cut the costs. But the problem with doing that is, it's not like natural gas where it can just be moved at the press of a button.
Right.
You actually have to send physically people out to change
to move it.
the lines.
Yeah.
But they were telling everybody that they had already figured it out.
That's as bad as the guy who told me one time that Wi-Fi was in the air and it's free.
I know, right?
You know,
Oh
it's
my
just
God. You're like, no,
you can't do that.
no, it's not.
Do they not know how things work?
They spent an unholy amount of money
on some bullshit for real.
for something, and they truly believed, they were like, oh, well, we can get everybody on board. I was like, but here's the other problem. Skilling, the stuff in the company that was actually bringing in real money dollars that were consistent, Skilling either sold or tried to sell because he didn't believe they were worth it because there was no opportunity to bring in abnormal profits. So the stuff, the building blocks of what they needed to actually make this business successful, Skilling pretty much sold or got rid of. Here's the other thing that broadband promised
I
to
just
do.
want to know who the fuck face was who was laying in bed at night and decided to come up with that harebrained scheme.
I know, right?
And thought that it would actually, like, you could sell people on that shit.
Oh, I know. It's bonkers. It's bonkers. So the other part of broadband. Now, once again, remember, 1999. Now, video on demand, everybody has it.
Right.
Right? 1999, Skilling came out and announced that Enron and Blockbuster had teamed up to deliver streaming, movies on demand. Right? When most households did not have the cables, the actual cable.
Because at that point, they were still changing over from what they had to the micro or optimum, Optify, whatever it was that they changed from at that point.
Yeah.
Fiber optics, that's what they were called.
That's what it's called. Yes. They literally came out and they said, this business is worth billions today. We already have the capability to stream movies into your home. Blockbuster was supposed to get the movie companies to line up and allow access to their movies. Movie companies were not having it.
No.
Enron was supposed to get the phone companies to agree to let them use their phone lines to actually stream it. But phone companies were like, fuck you. That cuts into our profits. Kiss my ass. So Blockbuster Now, Blockbuster actually said to line up the movie studios, it's going to take time. But Enron was so desperate to announce the project that they just pushed ahead. And fucking Ken Lay was like, I've got clout in Hollywood. I can get the studios to line up. And it was like, no, you don't. Nobody gives a shit about you, little podunk asshole.
Right.
Like, fuck you. So this deal, like they were promising that this technology was already up and running literally while Ken Lay was on stage at a conference touting this. One of the set boxes that they would need to install, which by the way, each consumer would have to pay $500 for, burst into flames. Like while they were testing it. It just burst into flames.
Oh my God.
While he was on stage saying that it worked.
It's the greatest thing in the world.
Exactly. It was like, okay. Right? Every trick in the bag to make this business look successful, they did. But it never worked, ever. They're sitting on stage saying, oh, it's great. The quality's great. People love it. Here's what's so funny. They signed up in this small little test market. They ran a pilot program. After spending billions to do this. You know how much money they made in the first month? $8.15. $8.15. They literally, like, these executives were like, they talk about it in the book, like these executives were poring over the statements. And one guy was actually bragging about their profits, and somebody handed him a $5 bill and was like, I just doubled your income.
Oh my God.
What the
fuck face.
Fuck face. This was truly sad.
Oh my
So
God.
both of these divisions are just losing money left and right. So now that you've made all these big promises and you need to show Wall Street on your financial statements how you're successful, how do you do it? How do you hide the failure? Right? Enter the guy who led, like Jeff Skilling and the rest of them, they led the company into fraud as far as what they were selling. But Andy Fastow, their CFO, led the company into fraud flat out financially. Andy Fastow was hired after he presented this totally fake doctored resume of all these accomplishments that he had never actually done.
When in all honesty, he was just a book cooker.
Pretty much, right? He couldn't be an accountant. He didn't have the skills to actually be an accountant. When he was finally fired and the new CFO came in, he couldn't find a balance sheet. He couldn't find a maturity schedule to tell him when the debt was due. Nothing.
Oh my God.
The only thing Andy Fastow was good at was something called structured finance. And you put this guy in charge of the 7th largest corporation in the country. Not so fucking smart. So, structured finance. This is kind of the other side of the coin to market, right? Structured finance and this is so complicated, and George tried to explain it to me, but even he doesn't quite understand how Andy Fastow pulled this shit off. I will admit freely, I don't quite understand it. But here's what it seems like. You create what they call a special purpose entity, right? That's kind of a company that's technically a separate company from Enron, but it still kind of falls under that umbrella. But it's built only to do business with Enron, right? And it takes money from banks who are giving them money simply because they're flat out telling them, if you give us money for this special purpose entity, we will give you other deals that make you tons of money, right? Which is that's kind of illegal, right?
Okay, so so far, like, okay, so say I'm going to do a business deal with you. And say like the financing for that business will go through that bank then.
Right.
Okay.
So here's how it works. One of the special purpose entities they call Jedi, right? Jedi buys the debt from Enron to put it on their books, right? And it's hedged, which hedging basically means like insurance, by Enron's stock. So now the debt is off Enron's books. It doesn't actually have to appear on any of their financial statements, right? All you have to do is say that there is a special purpose entity, that there is this structured finance deal, which they did in the vaguest possible ways in their financial disclosures. But we'll get to that in a minute. So you hide the debt. They had hundreds of special purpose entities to hide all of their debt. And the deal was the debt could stay off Enron's balance sheet as long as their stock did not fall below a certain level and their credit rating did not fall below a certain level. So, to recap, mark to market makes it look like they have tons of money they don't have. And structured finance makes it look like they have no debt when they are swimming in debt. That is how it all happened. Make sense?
Yeah.
It's fucked up. They booked recurring charges as one-time charges. They booked the sale of items where they got money from a sale as recurring revenue, right?
Wait.
So along with the structured finance to hide the debt, that's how their accounting people...
So like they were buying the same shit over and over again to show that they were... Oh my...
Stuff that they should have had to show in their financial statements that they were buying over and over, they booked as just one-time revenue. So when investors were looking at it, they were like, oh, that's just a one-time purchase.
Right.
Not realizing...
That those 9 baby grand pianos was something that, yeah.
Right. And then they booked stuff that should have been like a one-time revenue thing where they got, something for... They sold something for $100 million, they would book it as reoccurring revenue, making it look like they were going to get that $100 million every year. Right?
That's
now.
The fuck?
Oh, God. So here's the way that one of the accountants explained it, and I find this
I'm going to start doing a little creative bookkeeping myself.
I know, right? I find this to be absolutely amazing. The question is, how did they get away with it for so long? Because Enron's partners in crime looked at the law and the rules as things to be gotten around, not necessarily rules to be followed.
They were just suggestions.
Pretty much. Here's literally how one executive explained it. I shit you not. I'm going to read this. Say you have a dog, but the rules say you need to have a duck. So there are rules for what constitutes a duck. Yellow feet, white covering, orange beak. So you take the dog. You paint its feet yellow. Its fur white. You paste an orange plastic beak on its nose and say to your accountants, see, it's a duck. Wouldn't you agree it's a duck? And the accountant says, well, technically it meets the requirements of what's a duck. So it's a duck. And nobody is willing to say that it's really a dog.
Dog dressed like a duck.
That is what they did. That is how they treated accounting rules as turning a dog into a duck. I found that explanation to be amazing. Now, the other question is how did they get away with this? With the fact that, yeah, they put certain questions in there, but how did the accountants agree to this? The lawyers agree to this. The board agree to this.
Right.
Analysts, investors, the credit rating agencies, the SEC. How did they do this? And ultimately the answer, and this is kind of where it gets back to Trump, I hate to say it, but Enron pretty much committed this in public. They didn't hide it. Like how Trump is kind of breaking the law blatantly in public, it makes people feel like it's not wrong because they didn't hide it. They were vague about it. And what it should have done was cause questions. And this is once again comes back to us, right? We are the people. Perfect example. I had that guy at Newton's that would come to work. He was a new guy. He wasn't doing all that great, but he had some potential. But he was coming to work drunk. And everybody knew it. And finally, I sat down with his manager and I was like, look, we had a guy at Chucky's that was drunk all the time. And everybody knew it. And we didn't do anything about it. And one day he got in an accident leaving the parking lot of work. And they realized he was drunk. After an 8-hour shift, he was drunk. In other words, he was drinking at work. Right. And we knew it. It was in the paper. Everybody saw it. There was horrible press for the company. You have to be able to have the foresight to see what can happen. And none of these people did it. They all looked at every individual thing or these vaguely worded things. Do you really think Andy Fastow is going to come into these board meetings and say, I'm committing fraud?
Right, no.
Your job is to ask these questions and to dig and take this one vague line about a special purpose entity and ask. But even when they knew what it was, they still didn't have the foresight to see where it was going to end up. They had their hands out at the table and they were making their money and they didn't give a fuck.
That is crazy. Just blatantly stealing.
Totally. So let's talk a little bit about the specific groups of people. Arthur Anderson, their accountants, Vincent and Elkins, the lawyers, and the board. Everything had to be approved by them, right? Everybody believed everybody else was doing their job. Arthur Anderson was like, well, Vincent and Elkins said it's okay, so they didn't do their due diligence. Vincent and Elkins were saying, well, Arthur Anderson signed off, so it must be okay. The board was saying, well, if Vincent and Elkins and Arthur Anderson approved it, then it must be okay. And therefore it becomes a shell game. You're hiding the responsibility under different shells.
Right.
Where is it, right? They all assumed somebody else was doing their job when none of them were doing their job. That's kind of why I have a problem with CEOs and board members making so much money. The reason they make that much money is because they're supposed to ensure the health and safety of the company. If you don't do that, if you're just saying, well, how was I supposed to know? You were supposed to ask. You can't just assume everybody else is doing their jobs and not ask questions. That is what you are supposed to do. It's not just getting your paycheck and going home.
No.
You actually have to work.
And you have to make sure that the company's doing the right thing.
But they didn't do that.
No.
So let's talk about the stock analysts. Why weren't they? Some of this stuff was outlined for them. They knew it. Later, when Congress investigated, they were like, you're saying that you didn't know and certain things were kept from you, but in your emails, you flat out say you knew what the deal was. Right? At this point in history, stock analysts really stopped being analysts, and they really became more of marketers. They ran around telling investors, I have a strong buy recommendation on this stock.
Right.
Instead of actually analyzing, they just took whatever Enron said as gospel, turned around and presented it. Oh, they were like a propaganda arm for Enron instead of actually analyzing. If analysts did question it, Enron fucking went, like, blacklisted him and went after him fucking hard. They would cut off banks with analysts that didn't toe the company line. One of the stories in there is a guy named John Olson. He went to different companies. He worked for Merrill Lynch, for Goldman Sachs, like, and basically Enron just chased him, like, telling his bosses, like, he's awful. We're not giving you $50 million as part of this deal because you've still hired him, and it's only because you still have him, and blah, 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 blah.
God.
Like, ended up getting him fired. Eventually, he ended up at a small Houston firm, and Ken Lay actually sent a letter to his boss, which John Olson has framed in his office now.
Oh
because the letter said, John Olson's been wrong about Enron for the last 10 years, and he's still wrong. But I'll say one thing for him. He's consistent, right? Here's the thing. John Olson says, I may be old and worthless, and I may have been wrong, but at least I can spell consistent, because Ken Lay spelled consistent wrong. Holy shit. But that's the thing is, and banks were cool with this. They were cool with firing analysts and taking analysts off projects that wouldn't just toe the company line.
And you can't tell me that the banks don't see this shit happening, all this money and everything else being,
they know,
moved around and stuff.
They know.
Right.
Like, oh, this is the stock I should buy, blah, blah, blah. But then the question is, where's the SEC in all this? The SEC is basically overworked and understaffed. Now, towards the end of the book, they actually admit that the reason they finally started their investigation was because reporters finally started questioning it. But that took years. Reporters like the Enron story because it sold papers and magazines. If you're the magazine that has specific articles about a stock that you're calling a sure thing that could make you a ton of money, of course it's going to sell papers. People are going to eat it up because they're like, oh, it's going to sell like water in the desert. Where people are like, sweet, this is the thing I should buy. So everybody was like, where the fuck was the SEC? Like, hello?
Well, I mean, and the same shit is still happening in certain aspects of our country.
Totally.
The reporters are doing
the work.
Totally. Waiting for the government to step in and finally say enough is enough. Exactly. And that's a damn shame that the reporters have to be the ones that have to go through all this, because really, they should just be reporting what's going on. Not, okay.
They shouldn't have to be the police.
Right.
But they end up being that.
Yeah.
Which is fucking sad. So, the SEC, the reporters, it took the reporters years to actually kind of start to catch on.
Uh-huh.
But there's two other groups of people I really want to talk about. One is the credit rating agencies. They shouldn't have given a shit. They should not have been swept up in the Enron fairy tale, right? The only thing they should have cared about is the ability for a company to repay its debt. That's it, right? And they weren't financially invested. They got the same amount of money from Enron that they would get from any other corporation to do what they did, right? But Enron actually left off a lot of the details of the structured finance that they should have included to the credit rating agencies, right? Here's what's amazing. When Congress investigated and they actually came to testify before Congress, they were like, well, they left all this stuff off that would have been able to show us what was really going on. And Congress was like, they may have left it off your papers, but they actually did say what it was, not in extreme details.
Right,
but they said what it was in their public statements. And the credit rating agencies amazingly said, well, we didn't actually read their public statements.
Oh.
Why the fuck didn't you compare the two?
So, okay.
It was extraordinary what they did.
Oh my God.
Now, the other group of people we're going to talk about is this poor internal compliance department. Because this is us. Oh my God. What they did
probably didn't know what the fuck. I would be so stressed out. We would be throwing up every day.
Oh, what these poor people did. These people were called the RAC, the Risk Assessment and Compliance Department. Skilling actually used this department as a prop for years to the investment community, saying, yes, because they were like, you're taking all these crazy risks. But he pointed to this saying, we measure our risks, and this department is phenomenal, and they've got unbelievable controls and telling us when to proceed and when not to.
Oh my
God.
God.
But honestly, this poor department was just tortured. Absolutely tortured. They put a guy in charge of it named Evan Bai. And he was this total like wimp. And now that was basically Carly's role.
Mhm.
You know, Carly went in and fought like
Yeah, like
hell.
crazy
when
all the
she
time.
knew shit was wrong, she was not content to just be like, okay. She would not do that. This motherfucker was just like, ugh. Because guess what? Guess who else got millions of dollars in bonuses?
I'm
to
sure.
keep his mouth shut. Right? There were lines on each deal sheet that they called a dash, right? That was either said, okay to proceed or do not proceed, right? Everything was pretty much signed off on. And even if like you or me said no, they knew all they had to do is go to Evan By and he'd be like, fine, I'll sign it.
Oh
So when you're saying no, but your boss overrides you every single time,
knowing that what you're doing is wrong.
what are you going to do? This poor group was just tortured. Now here's at one point, the head of the group, Evan By, he said he actually complained, and this is like so first world rich white people problems. You're gonna die when I tell you what this dude bitched about. He was actually complaining that he had to buy a new fax machine for his summer home in New Hampshire because he was getting so many approval sheets to sign for deals.
Oh, Evan, you poor little
Fuck
pussy ass bitch.
You,
Oh
man.
my God.
Eat a dick, motherfucker. If that's your biggest
If that's your
goddamn
biggest fucking problem.
you don't got problems. Hate to break it to you,
Right?
pussy.
Fuck off.
Jesus Christ. Now, here's how they kept that group specifically in check. Imagine if they had this system at Chucky's.
Oh, God.
You and I would have been there for maybe 10 minutes before we got fired. They kept them in check with something they called the PRC, the Performance Review Committee. This is your yearly review. Your boss doesn't necessarily write your yearly review. This group decides it. It's a panel of employees and leaders and executives from every department, right? That every year they basically hole up for like a month in a hotel near the Enron site, where they evaluate each and every employee one by one with their picture up on a screen so they can see their personal appearance. Right?
Oh my God.
And every decision has to be unanimous, and they rank each person from a 1 to a 5, right? Now it's on a curve. So at least 10 to 15% of your employee base has to be a 5, which is the worst grade. And if you are a 5 2 years in a row, you are supposed to be fired. So hence the employees called the system rank and yank, right?
Oh,
No company can survive turning over 15% of their employee base every year simply because other employees had to vote on them, right? Now, this is how they actually kept the RIC in check. The traders and the people that did deals got to rank the RIC members.
So if you were declining deals.
So imagine the leadership team that we scored calls for being able to rank us, whether or not we approved their awful deals, no questions asked. Any of these people that questioned their deals, they rank and yanked them right out the fucking door. Imagine that. Imagine if your compliance team was graded by the people you were supposed to be policing. That's insane.
I would have had a job for exactly 1 year then, because
we would have been gone.
I would have been gone.
We would have been gone.
Because I questioned everything and
Exactly.
I argued with people. Not argued to be just argumentative, but my point, I was, what did he call us? Oh, spirited. We were spirited.
We were spirited. I remember that.
Yeah, spirited.
They're a spirited bunch.
Yes.
Like, yes.
Yes, so that especially about Jessica's just very spirited.
Yes, we were.
We were a very spirited bunch. So I don't know that we would have even made it to the first.
No, we would have been
round.
yanked right out.
Right. It wouldn't have even been a rank. We'd just been yanked.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no way.
That PRC process. Once again, everybody needs to read
Especially
the book
with somebody
because it
like
was brutal.
Especially with somebody like Carly as your leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's I don't want to say that she kept our our moral compass, pointed in the right direction, but she's the one who made us feel like it was okay. Like that was
She made it okay for us to question.
To question
she made it okay for us
things,
to
yeah.
challenge. She made it okay for us to do the right thing, simply
regardless of
because
what
it was-
somebody else might be trying to get us to say or do. She made that okay for us.
She made it okay for us to tell certain people, no, I'm not going to commit fraud because you think it's necessary.
Right, yeah.
Fuck you.
So let's talk about the culture a little bit, because this is a huge part of Sharon Watkins' book, because it was a culture of excess between what the company paid for and what people bought with their bonuses and stuff. It was just crazy. So even junior executives like us, like when we were just starting out as QAs, they could hire personal consultants to help chase pipe dreams of their business plans. Everybody would come up with their own business proposal, right? And then submit it to their boss and just do it. And even people like at our level, when we were first starting out as QAs, could hire a consultant for $100,000 to help them come up with some fucking business plan.
Did it even have to be associated or have anything to do with Enron? It could just be
I think we should get into daffodil production.
Right,
like,
right.
What?
I want to open up a daycare / coffee shop.
Oh, they had that.
Shut up.
They had a personal concierge service that every employee had 24/7 access to. They would pick up your dry cleaning, walk your dogs, take your dogs to the vet, even shop for anniversary presents for you so that you could spend all of your time being focused on Enron. Right? They had a limousine service on call 24/7 just for them that any employee could use. They had an emergency daycare for, like, if your kid was sick and couldn't go to daycare, they called it Enron's Healing Hands, where you could bring all the sick kids.
I'd be afraid I wouldn't get my kid back.
Thank you. I know, right?
Creepy.
But then they had a regular daycare for, like, the not sick kids. They even had a camp that you could send your kids to that they called Camp Enron.
No,
I'm not. You're gonna hold my fucking kid hostage. God damn it!
Get the fuck out of here.
Car dealerships in the area knew when it was bonus time. Now, by the way, with the PRC process, I said that wrong. They would actually do the PRC process of reviewing twice a year. So every 6 months. And that's when they determined your bonus. If you were ranked a 1, you could get, a $5 million bonus. But if you were ranked a 5, you would get like a $10,000 bonus, and you were supposed to be fired, right? But car dealerships in the area knew when it was bonus time, and they would stock up on their luxury cars because there would always be a rush of Enron employees looking to buy Porsches or Mercedes. Porsches were their favorite. On weeks that bonuses were handed out, it became a madhouse. Here's an excerpt from Power Failure, Sharon Watkin and Mimi Schwartz's book. Here's what it said. The wailing at bonus time could be heard down the halls of the 50th floor as one executive or another bawled about being dishonored by a paltry $400,000 bonus. The caterwauling was so intense that Jeff Skilling routinely disappeared the week's bonuses were handed out. The dishonor part kills me because they were acting like they were in ancient China or they were part of the Crips and the Bloods or even Klingons. Like, you have dishonored me.
Crime family.
I know. I half expected to see like somebody pop out a little white glove and be like, "You have insulted my honor, sir." Like they're in the fucking antebellum South or some nonsense.
Meet me at sunset in the old field by the horses.
I know. Right? Meet me by Old Hickory so we can work out our differences and my honor can be restored. Like, okay, Scarlett. Jesus Christ. Everyone got computers for their homes and cell phones paid for by the company. Their health care coverage would pay for elderly family members who needed hospice care. They had, like I said, they had the daycare center. They had the summer camp. The London office paid for a massive building to be built that overlooked Buckingham Palace just to display their opulence and status to the world. Right?
Look, I was happy I got a $300 bonus.
I know,
I was
right?
like, $300!
I know. But here's the dark side. Here's the flip side to that. Like, there's always a dark side, right? The dark side, for example, was mostly against women. Women who worked in the same department who were promoted at the same time and ranked the exact same as men were making over $100,000 less in bonus and base pay. So one lady, Amanda Martin, she got slipped an anonymous note that was like a printout of all of the bonuses from the guys that had been hired and promoted and ranked at the same time and the exact same way as her, but showed that she was paid like about in the last year, an average of like $400,000 less than they were. Now she ended up bitching to Skilling, and Skilling cut her a check, but not everybody got, somebody to slip them a little note.
Secret note. Yeah.
Right? I forgot to say this. Here's something else that with the excess, right? Kenley's whore, second wife, former whore, she actually kicked some executives off a private plane coming home from Europe and made them fly commercial because there was not enough room on the plane for them and all the things she had purchased while they were there. How much shopping do you need to do, bitch?
Off the plane.
Seriously. You want to know where all their fucking money went? Shopping in Europe.
Right.
And now shopping to fill up a plane?
That's
What?
a lot of shit. Like, what did you buy when you were...
Thank you. That's fucking excessive. Good
I'll take the Queen's crown jewels.
I know, right? I'll have one palace and... Do you have a dragon? Can I just take a dragon home? Is that possible?
Right.
Like,
do you have a court jester I can get?
I know. I'm just going to buy a person. Like, good Christ. So the other part, like the environment for women, they had on the trader floor, because the traders were all mostly men, and they were they described it as just being a locker room. Like, everybody pretty much had to, people would avoid that floor, women especially, because they had what they called a honey board on the trading floor with pictures of the women who worked there and ranking them and their looks.
That's like 5 million.
Yeah, it's sexual harassment out the fucking wazoo. Like, horrible. When some women complained to HR, they would find threatening notes on their car saying things like, keep your mouth shut or else. It was like they literally were the Gambino fucking crime family. Like, what the hell?
Like what you hear? Rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcasting platform. And follow us on our Facebook page by searching Q as in Cucumber. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram by searching QAIC_Lara, LARA, and QAIC_Tanya, TANYA. Don't forget to check out our other show, hosted by me and Jessica James, called The Parent Memoirs. And we want to hear from you. Share your stories by emailing us at qasincucumber@yahoo.com, and you might just hear your stories on a future episode. Love your faces.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.